The silence in the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons was not an empty silence. It was a heavy, weighted thing, thick with the collective intake of 500 breaths. It was a silence so dense it felt like you could press your thumb into it and leave a dent. Moments before, the air had been buzzing, a symphony of clinking crystal, discreet laughter, and the self-satisfied murmur of old money and new tech fortunes mingling under chandeliers that dripped light like frozen waterfalls. Now, all that was gone. Every eye, from the city's mayor to the venture capitalists and socialites, was fixed on the stage, on the old woman standing there, bathed in a spotlight that made the gold threads in her gown shimmer like a captured star. Her name was Bisi Adebayo, and she looked like a queen. Not a queen from a European fairy tale, but a queen from an epic, an Olori from the heart of the Yoruba kingdom. Her gown was not merely a dress. It was a story told in kente cloth, the patterns weaving a history of resilience and grace. Her face, a beautiful roadmap of 72 years, was serene, but two single tears traced paths down her cheeks, catching the light like liquid diamonds. Beside her stood Kaelo Ikwensi. To the world, he was the enigmatic founder of Omnicore, a tech monolith with a valuation that made nations blush. His net worth was a staggering $5.3 billion. He was wearing a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than the average car. But he held the old woman's hand with a gentleness that was anything but corporate. The auctioneer, a man accustomed to coaxing millions out of egos for a good cause, seemed at a loss for words. He had just announced the final surprise lot of the evening, a foundational gift for the newly established BC's Bowl Foundation. Kaelo had taken the microphone. For months, Kaelo's voice was calm, yet it filled every corner of the vast room. I have been searching for a partner, not a business partner, a partner in humanity, someone who understands that wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing back on Mama Bisi. I found that partner not in a boardroom, not at a summit in Davos, but in a crowded city market on a day when I had nothing. He made air quotes around the word nothing. I was a man with no wallet, no name, no status. And on that day, this woman, who had very little, gave me everything. She gave me a bowl of pepper soup. She gave me her kindness. She didn't ask what I could do for her. She just saw a hungry man and fed him. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the crowd. A billionaire? Hungry? In a market? Kaelo raised a hand, and the silence returned. Absolute. Tonight, to launch the BC's Bowl Foundation, which will build and supply community kitchens in every underserved neighborhood in this city, my family's trust is making an initial endowment. He looked at the auctioneer, then at the audience. Of $50 million. The gasp was audible, a sharp collective shock. Phones, which had been discreetly tucked away, suddenly emerged, their screens lighting up faces frozen in disbelief. But the real drama wasn't in the gasps of the wealthy. It was in the corner, near the service entrance. A waitress, holding a silver tray of half-empty champagne flutes, stood frozen. Her name was Tundun. Her uniform was ill-fitting, her face a mask of sour resentment that was cracking under the weight of sheer, earth-shattering shock. Her eyes were wide, fixated on the woman on stage, on Mama Bisi, the old woman from the market stall next to hers, the woman she had mocked, ridiculed, and tormented for years, the woman she had called a dusty old relic just last week. Kaelo wasn't finished. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to an intimate, almost dangerous level. Let this be a lesson to all of us. The universe is always watching. Treat the person you think is a nobody with the same respect you would treat a king, because you never know. You just never know. As the room exploded into a standing ovation, a thunderous wave of applause that felt like it could shake the city's foundations, Tundun's world went silent. The silver tray slipped from her numb fingers. It hit the marble floor with a sound that was both deafening and pathetic. A crash, a shatter, a series of tinkling echoes that was the sound of her own hollow soul breaking. Every head in her vicinity turned. They saw the dropped tray, the spreading puddle of champagne, the broken glass. But mostly, they saw her face, a canvas of horror, regret, and the final, brutal understanding of a karmic debt coming due. In a room full of applause for an act of supreme grace, Tundun's humiliation was total, absolute, and utterly silent. If you love stories where the humble are exalted and the proud are brought low, where kindness is revealed as the ultimate superpower, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications right now, because the story of how this quiet, dignified grandmother brought a room full of billionaires to their feet and her cruelest tormentor to her knees is a journey you do not want to miss. The payback in this story is going to be legendary. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 5 years before that glittering night, Bisi Adebayo was not standing in a spotlight. She was kneeling on cold tile floors, the scent of industrial bleach sharp in her nostrils. She was 67 years old and worked 2 full-time jobs. From 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., she was part of a cleaning crew at a downtown office tower. Her hands, which once wove intricate aso-oke fabrics in her Nigerian village, now pushing a heavy mop and scrubbing away the careless footprints of daytime executives. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., she worked in the kitchen of a hospital cafeteria, washing endless racks of dishes, the steam scalding her face. In the 4 hours in between, she did not sleep. She commuted, she prepared food for the next day, and she checked on her granddaughter. Her granddaughter, Funke, was the sun and the moon of her world. A bright, beautiful 7-year-old with eyes that held the same spark as her mother's. Bisi's daughter, Adiola, had passed away just a year after they had arrived in America. A sudden illness, a healthcare system they couldn't navigate, and a void that could never be filled. Adiola had come to America with a nursing degree and a heart full of dreams. She had wanted to give her daughter, Funke, and her mother, Bisi, a better life. In the end, it was Bisi who was left to fulfill that promise, a promise that felt heavier than the industrial vacuum she strapped to her back every night. They lived in a small, 1-bedroom apartment in a part of the city the tourist maps ignored. The paint was peeling, the pipes groaned like a dying man, and the sirens were a constant, mournful lullaby. But inside, Mama Bisi made it a home. The air was always thick with the smell of something delicious, stewing fish, frying plantain, or the rich, complex aroma of her pepper soup. That soup was her inheritance, a recipe passed down from her grandmother, a secret blend of Scotch bonnets, ginger, sacred uziza leaves, and a dozen other spices that she ground by hand. It was a soup that could cure a cold, mend a broken heart, and, as her own mother used to say, make a king remember his home. For 3 years, Bisi worked. She never took a day off. She never complained. Her bank account grew with agonizing slowness. Every dollar was a prayer. Every deposit was a step closer to a dream. Not a grand dream of wealth, but a simple dream of dignity. She wanted to stop cleaning up after other people. She wanted to create something of her own. She wanted a small stall at the Liberty Market, the sprawling, chaotic, vibrant heart of the city's immigrant communities. She wanted to sell her food, her soup, her legacy. Finally, the day came. She had saved exactly $4,300. It was enough for the deposit, the first month's rent on a tiny 10 by 10 foot stall, a used refrigerator, and a few pots. The day she signed the lease, she held the key in her palm and cried. It wasn't a key to a stall. It was the key to her own life. The Liberty Market was a world unto itself, a sensory explosion of color, sound, and smell. The call of vendors selling everything from fresh mangoes to vibrant Ankara fabrics, the rhythm of salsa music bleeding into Afro beats, the smell of Vietnamese pho mingling with Jamaican jerk chicken. Mama BC set up her stall with meticulous care. She scrubbed every surface, hung a single string of colored lights, and hand-painted a simple wooden sign, BC's Kitchen. And right next to her was Tundun. Tundun was everything BC was not. She was young, loud, and flashy. Her stall, Tundun's Trends, sold cheap, factory-made jewelry and knockoff designer handbags she imported from China. She wore clothes that were too tight, makeup that was too thick, and a smile that was 40% real and 60% cosmetic dentistry. From the very first day, she looked at Mama BC and her humble stall with undisguised contempt. The first clash happened within a week. Mama BC was carrying a large, steaming pot of her pepper soup from the small prep area to the front counter. Her hands, stiff with arthritis from years of manual labor, trembled for a second. A small amount of the rich, red broth sloshed over the side, splashing onto the concrete floor, a few drops landing near the edge of Tundun's pristine, white rug. Tundun, who had been loudly negotiating with a customer over a fake Gucci belt, stopped mid-sentence. She turned, her eyes narrowing. "Hey, old woman, look what you've done!" Mama BC's face flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry, my dear. It was an accident. Let me clean it right away." But Tundun wasn't interested in apologies. She saw an audience. "An accident? You are the accident. Coming here with your smelly village food. Now my stall stinks of fish and pepper. Who is going to want to buy a luxury handbag that smells like your dirty soup?" The cruelty was so casual, so sharp. Mama BC felt the sting of it like a slap. The other vendors nearby went quiet, looking away, not wanting to get involved. Humiliation was a hot, creeping thing. "It is not dirty," Mama BC said, her voice quiet but firm. "It is the food of my home." Tundun let out a shrill laugh. "Your home? You should have stayed there. This is America. We don't want your poverty and your strange smells here. Go on, clean it up, before you drive all my customers away, you old witch." The word witch hung in the air, ugly and venomous. Mama BC, with a dignity that seemed to rise from the very earth, did not argue. She simply retrieved a cloth and a bucket of water and cleaned the small spill, her movements deliberate and calm. But as she knelt there, scrubbing the concrete, she felt the old ache of being an outsider, the familiar pain of being judged and found wanting. She didn't forget Tundun's face, twisted with spite. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. Fate wasn't done with Tundun, and it certainly wasn't done with her. Kalo Equincy adjusted the collar of his frayed, faded t-shirt. It was a $10 shirt he'd bought at a discount store, but it felt more real than the $1,000 silk shirts that hung in his closet. He looked at his reflection in the window of his truck, a 1998 Toyota Tacoma, with a dent in the passenger door and a coat of dust that suggested a long, hard life. He saw a man in his late 30s with tired eyes and a 3-day-old stubble. He looked like a construction worker at the end of a long week. He looked anonymous. He looked perfect. "Are you sure about this, sir?" a voice said from the driver's seat. It was Ade, his head of security, a mountain of a man poured into a driver's uniform. Ade had been with Kylo for 15 years, since before the first billion. His face was a permanent mask of weary exasperation, especially when Kylo embarked on one of his experiments. "I'm sure, Ade," Kylo said, his gaze drifting towards the chaotic entrance of the Liberty Market. "I need this." "What you need, sir, with all due respect, is a vacation. On a private island, surrounded by people paid to agree with you, not this poverty simulation." Kylo chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That's the problem, Ade. I'm surrounded by people paid to agree with me. I'm surrounded by women who look at me and see a walking, talking bank vault. Remember Cassandra?" Ade winced. The art gallery curator who spontaneously developed a deep passion for 17th century Nigerian bronze work 2 days after your profile came out in Forbes? "Yes, sir, I remember." "She didn't love me, Ade. She loved the idea of endowing a new wing at the museum in her name. And before her, there was Isabel, the real estate mogul. She didn't want to hold my hand. She wanted to hold the deeds to my properties in Manhattan." Kylo sighed, the weight of his own wealth pressing down on him. "My mother called me this morning." Ade's expression softened. He had immense respect for Kylo's mother, a wise, formidable woman who still lived in the same modest house in Lagos where she'd raised her son. "What did Mama Equincy have to say?" "She told me an old proverb. She said, 'You don't test the strength of a pot with a silver spoon, my son. You test it with fire. And you don't test the strength of a person's character with wealth. You test it with need.'" Kylo opened the truck door. He had his phone and a single key. He had purposefully left his wallet, with its black Amex card and slew of IDs, sitting on his marble kitchen island, miles away in his penthouse apartment that overlooked the entire city. "The plan is simple," Kylo said. "I'm a guy who lost his wallet. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. Let's see what happens." "Let's test the pot." Ade sighed, the sound of a man who knew he couldn't win. "Yes, sir, the pot. I'll be circling the block. Comms are open. Just say the word compromised, and a team of men who can kill with their thumbs will descend on this place. Relax, Ade. It's a market, not a war zone." Kylo gave him a rare, genuine smile. "I'll be fine." He stepped out of the truck and merged into the river of people flowing into the market. The sensory overload was immediate and exhilarating. He felt invisible, a single drop in a vast ocean of humanity. It was intoxicating. He began his experiment. He approached a fruit vendor, a man with a kind face, and explained his situation. "Excuse me, I seem to have lost my wallet. I'm just incredibly thirsty. Is there any chance I could have a bottle of water? I can come back and pay you later, I promise." The man's kind face hardened instantly. "No wallet, no water. This is a business. Go away." Next, he tried a bakery stall, the smell of fresh bread making his stomach rumble. A woman with flour on her apron listened to his story with a sympathetic expression, but then shook her head. "Sorry, times are hard for everyone." He felt a familiar pang of disappointment. Not anger, just a quiet, weary sadness. This is what the world was, transactional, a place of closed fists. He was about to give up, to head back to the truck and admit to Ade that his mother's proverb was a beautiful lie in a cruel world. But then he saw a stall tucked away in a corner. It was called Tundun's Trends. It was bright and garish, and a young woman was loudly showing off a sparkly purse to a potential customer. Maybe youth would have more compassion. He walked over, waiting patiently until she was done. "Excuse me," he began. Tundun turned, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of his old t-shirt, his dusty jeans, his worn-out boots. She visibly sneered. "What do you want? If you're not buying, you're wasting air." "I'm sorry to bother you," Kylo said, maintaining his polite, humble demeanor. "I've lost my wallet, and I haven't eaten all day. I was just wondering if—" Tundun cut him off with a sharp, derisive laugh. "If I would give you a handout? Look at you. A big, strong man, begging. Why don't you get a job instead of bothering hard-working businesswomen? Get away from my stall. You're scaring my customers." She physically shoved him, a small, aggressive push. "Go!" Stung by the venom in her voice and the casual cruelty of her shove, Kylo stumbled back. This was worse than indifference. This was contempt. This was the ugliness he knew existed, the part of human nature that enjoys kicking someone when they're down. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. His experiment was a failure. His mother was wrong. Character wasn't tested by need. It was revealed to be absent. He turned to leave the market, his shoulders slumped. And then a smell hit him. It was rich, peppery, and deeply familiar. It smelled like his childhood. It smelled like his mother's kitchen on a rainy day in Lagos. He followed the scent like a man in a trance, past a stall selling phone cases, past another selling incense, until he arrived at a small, simple stall with a hand-painted sign, "BC's Kitchen." An old woman with kind, intelligent eyes was carefully ladling a deep red broth into a small container for a customer. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace. When she was finished, she looked up and saw him standing there. She offered a small, tired smile. "Can I help you, my son?" Kylo felt a lump form in his throat. He swallowed and began his now well-rehearsed, hopeless speech. "Ma'am, I've lost my wallet. I'm so sorry to ask, but I'm just very hungry. I smelled your soup." He trailed off, expecting the same dismissal, the same cold shutdown. The woman, Mama BC, didn't hesitate. Her smile didn't falter. She simply reached under her counter, pulled out a clean plastic bowl and a spoon, and began to ladle the steaming pepper soup into it. "Ah, a hungry man cannot think. Sit, sit," she said, gesturing to a small, wobbly plastic stool next to her stall. She then grabbed a bottle of water from her cooler. "You must be thirsty too." Kylo was stunned into silence. He took the bowl, his hands trembling slightly. "Ma'am, I can't pay you. I told you, I have no money." She waved a dismissive hand, her bangles clinking softly. Money. Money comes, money goes. But kindness is a seed you plant. You never know what tree will grow. Eat. It is God who provides, not me." He sat down on the plastic stool, a man worth over $5 billion, and took his first spoonful of the soup. The heat, the spice, the complexity of it exploded on his tongue. It was delicious. But it was more than delicious. It was an act of grace. It was a light in the darkness. It was a test, and she had passed with a quiet glory that put the entire world to shame. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not an old market vendor, but the partner in humanity he had been searching for his entire life. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he was going to change it forever. That first bowl of soup was the beginning of a ritual. Kaelo, true to his word, returned the next day. He walked up to Mama BC's stall, holding out a $20 bill. "Ma'am, for the soup and the water yesterday. Thank you again. You have no idea what it meant to me." Mama BC looked at the money, then back at his face. She shook her head gently. "I told you, my son. It was a gift. A gift is not a loan. Keep your money." "Please, I insist," Kaelo said, trying to press the bill into her hand. She closed her hand into a soft fist. "No. If you want to thank me, buy a bowl of soup today. Be my customer. That is thanks enough." And so he did. He bought a bowl of soup for $5 and sat on the same wobbly plastic stool. He asked her about her day. She told him about a supplier who was late with the fresh fish. He asked her about her sign. She told him she painted it herself with her granddaughter, Funke. The name came up with such love in her voice that Kaelo couldn't help but smile. He became a regular. 2-3 times a week, Kaelo would leave his glass and steel penthouse, change into his disguise of old jeans and a t-shirt, and drive the beat-up Tacoma to the Liberty Market. Ade would park a few blocks away, listening on the comms, his sighs of exasperation growing fainter with each passing week. Kaelo learned her rhythm. He learned that Wednesdays were her busiest day. He learned that she hummed old Yoruba hymns when she was grinding her spices. He learned about Funke, her 9-year-old granddaughter who loved science and wanted to be an astronaut. One afternoon, Funke was there, a bright girl with pigtails and her grandmother's eyes, doing her homework on a makeshift table behind the counter. Kaelo, who had a degree in mathematics from MIT, helped her with a tricky fraction problem. Funke looked at him with awe. "You're smart." Mama BC laughed, a rich, warm sound. "You see, this man is not just a handsome face." Kaelo felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the pepper soup. He was no longer a billionaire or a CEO. He was just K, the nice man who liked soup and was good at math. He was a person. He felt seen for the first time in years. He also saw the ugliness she faced every day. He was sitting on his stool one afternoon when Tundun strutted over. She was angry about a new market regulation that forbade playing loud music. She directed her fury at Mama BC, who was the vendor's representative for their section. "This is your fault, old woman," Tundun hissed, her voice low enough to avoid attracting a crowd, but sharp enough to cut. "You and your old-fashioned ways. You just want everything to be quiet and miserable like you. My customers like music. It brings energy. You are killing my business." Mama BC finished wiping down her counter before she looked up. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. "Tundun, my dear, the regulation is for everyone. It is so we can all hear our customers and they can hear us. It is not about me." "It's always about you," Tundun spat. "With your sad little stall and your charity cases." She glanced at Kaelo, her lip curling in disgust. "Like him. I see him here all the time. Is he your boyfriend? Does he pay you in compliments because he has no money?" Kaelo's entire body tensed. Every instinct screamed at him to stand up, to unleash the power he held, to make a single phone call that would obliterate this woman's petty little empire. He could have her lease revoked, her suppliers cut off, her life ruined before she even knew what happened. But he looked at Mama BC. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, a silent command to stay seated, to stay calm. Then she turned back to Tundun. Her voice was not angry. It was filled with a profound, unshakable pity. "This man," she said, her voice soft as velvet, "is my friend. He is a good man with a kind heart. That is a currency you do not understand. Now please, go back to your stall. You are disturbing the peace." There was such authority in her quiet words, such power in her stillness, that Tundun was left speechless. She shot Kaelo one last venomous glare and stormed off, muttering under her breath. Kaelo let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Why do you let her talk to you like that?" he asked, his voice tight. Mama Bisi began to ladle him a bowl of soup, her movements unhurried. "Anger is a fire that burns the one who holds it, my son. She is not angry at me. She is angry at her own life. To fight her would be to let her fire burn me too. I have no time for that. I have soup to make." She handed him the bowl. "Eat. Your heart is troubled." He took the soup, his respect for her deepening into something that felt like awe. She wasn't just a kind woman. She was a warrior of the spirit. Her dignity was her shield, her grace her sword. He learned about her dream one rainy Tuesday when the market was slow. He asked her if she ever thought of expanding. Her eyes took on a distant, wistful look. "Oh, sometimes I dream," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I dream of a small place, not a stall, but a real restaurant, with proper tables and chairs, where families can come and eat. I would call it Bisi's Bowl. I would have a big kitchen, and I would teach young people who need a chance how to cook. I would feed anyone who came to the door hungry, no questions asked." She sighed, the dream fading from her eyes. "But it is just a dream. Such things require money I do not have. But God is good. I have my stall. I have Funke. I have enough." Kaelo listened, and he didn't say a word. But in his mind, a plan began to form. A grand, audacious, beautiful plan. He had listened to her stories. He had seen her character. He had watched her give her last few dollars to a homeless woman who came by the stall saying, "She needs it more than I do." He had seen her give Funke her own dinner when there wasn't quite enough for two, claiming she wasn't hungry. He had tested the pot with need, with disrespect, with the quiet observation of daily life. And he had found it was not made of simple clay. It was forged from solid gold. The time for the experiment was over. The time for the blessing was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the day Kaelo first walked into the Liberty Market. 6 months of pepper soup on a plastic stool. 6 months of conversations that had slowly rebuilt his faith in humanity. He knew Mama Bisi's story, her struggles, her quiet triumphs. She knew him as K, the unemployed but kind man who was good with numbers and had a sad story about a lost love that he'd vaguely alluded to. Theirs was a friendship forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, a bond of mutual respect that transcended age, class, and background. One Thursday afternoon, as Mama Bisi was packing up her stall, Kaelo approached her. "Mama Bisi," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "Can I do something for you? Can I give you and Funke a ride home today? It looks like it might rain, and I don't want you waiting for the bus." She looked at him, then at the darkening sky. "But you do not have a car, Kay." "I borrowed one," he said, a small, mysterious smile playing on his lips. "From a friend. It's no trouble, I promise." Reluctantly, she agreed. She and Funke gathered their things, and Kaelo led them out of the market. Funke chattered happily, holding his hand. Mama Bisi walked with her usual, quiet dignity, though she seemed a little puzzled by his odd mood. He led them, not to the dusty, beat-up Tacoma she had seen him in once or twice, but to a side street where a single vehicle was parked. It was a car so black it seemed to drink the fading afternoon light. A Rolls-Royce Cullinan, long and sleek and utterly silent, a panther carved from obsidian. Standing beside it, in a crisp black suit, was Ade. Mama Bisi stopped in her tracks. Funke gasped. "Wow, Is that a spaceship? Mama Bisi looked at Kaelo, her brow furrowed in confusion. Kay, what is this? Did your friend send a taxi? Kaelo turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment, the point of no return. Mama Bisi, he said softly, this is not a taxi, and Ade is not a driver. Well, he is my driver. Ade, stone-faced as ever, opened the rear passenger door. The interior glowed with soft leather and polished wood. Mama Bisi was completely bewildered. Your driver? Kay, what are you saying? You work for the man who owns this car? She looked at him with concern. Is it a good job? Do they treat you well? Kaelo let out a short, emotional laugh. He took her hand. It felt small and fragile in his. No, Mama. I don't work for the man who owns this car. I am the man who owns this car. The confusion on her face deepened. She looked from the car to Ade to him. She shook her head as if trying to clear it. No, I don't understand. You are Kay. You have no money. The lost wallet, your old clothes. The clothes were a costume, Mama, he said gently. The lost wallet was a lie, a test. I'm so sorry for deceiving you, but I had to know. He gestured for her to get into the car. Please, there's something I want to show you. Numbly, she allowed him to guide her into the plush leather seat. Funke scrambled in after her, her eyes wide with wonder, touching everything. The ride was silent. Mama Bisi stared out the window, watching the familiar, gritty streets of her neighborhood give way to the polished avenues of downtown. They pulled up in front of a beautiful brick building in a trendy, upscale district. The windows were dark, but a sign in the front read, "For lease." Kaelo led them out of the car and to the front door. He produced a key, unlocked it, and pushed it open. He flicked a switch, and the cavernous interior was flooded with light. It was an empty restaurant space, a huge open kitchen area, a spacious dining room with high ceilings and exposed brick walls. It was perfect. It's beautiful, Mama Bisi whispered, her voice full of awe. Someone will be very lucky to have this place. Kaelo turned to her, his eyes shining with emotion. Someone is very lucky, Mama. You. It's yours. She stared at him, her mind refusing to process the words. Mine? What are you talking about? This is a joke. It's a cruel joke. It's not a joke, he said, stepping closer. He pulled out his phone and brought up a news article. It was the Forbes profile. There he was, Kaelo Ekwensi, founder and CEO of Omnicore. Net worth, $5.3 billion. His face, clean-shaven and serious, stared out from the screen. Mama Bisi looked at the phone, then at the man in front of her. The kind, sad eyes were the same. The gentle smile was the same, but everything else was different. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying, overwhelming clarity. The lie, the test, the unbelievable truth. Her legs felt weak. She stumbled back against a wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, her hands covering her mouth. Tears began to well in her eyes. Not tears of joy, tears of pure, unadulterated shock. But why? She finally whispered, the words choked with emotion. It was the only question that mattered. Why me? An old woman from the market? Kaelo knelt in front of her, on the dusty floor of her new restaurant. He took her hands in his. Why you? He repeated, his own voice thick. Because when I was pretending to have nothing, you treated me like I was everything. You didn't see a beggar. You saw a human being. You didn't ask for anything in return. You just gave. You gave me soup, yes, But you also gave me your stories, your wisdom, your friendship. You reminded me what it means to be good. He looked around the vast, empty space. You told me you dreamed of a place called BC's Bowl, a place to feed people, to give them a chance. Well, this is it. It's all yours. The lease is paid for 5 years. There's $500,000 in an account for you to buy equipment, hire staff, everything you need. This isn't a gift, Mama BC. It's an investment in the best person I have ever known. He squeezed her hands. You have a billionaire's heart, Mama. I just have the pocket change to match it. And that's when she broke. The tears of shock turned into tears of release. A lifetime of struggle, of loss, of quiet endurance came pouring out. She cried for her daughter, Adiola, who had dreamed of a day like this. She cried for Funke, whose future was now as bright as the stars she wanted to visit. And she cried because, for the first time, she felt truly seen. Not as a cleaner, not as a cook, not as an old immigrant woman, but as BC Adebayo, a woman of infinite worth. She wrapped her arms around the young billionaire kneeling before her and held on, weeping into the shoulder of his $10 t-shirt. The grand opening of BC's Bowl was the most talked about event of the year. It wasn't just a restaurant opening. It was a major philanthropic gala, with tickets starting at $5,000 a plate, all proceeds going to launch the new BC's Bowl Foundation. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite. Mayors, senators, tech titans, and society doyens, all drawn by the magnetic pull of Kaelo Ikwensi's name and the intriguing story of his mysterious new cause. The restaurant itself was a masterpiece. The exposed brick and high ceilings remained, but the space was now filled with warm, custom-made wooden tables, each adorned with a simple, elegant centerpiece of uziza leaves and bird's eye chilies in a small clay pot. The walls were decorated with stunning, large-scale photographs of the Liberty Market, celebrating the vibrant, chaotic beauty of the place where it all began. The air smelled divine, a symphony of spices and simmering broths wafting from the state-of-the-art kitchen. In that kitchen, Mama BC was in her element. She was not wearing a chef's uniform, but a simple, elegant Ankara dress, her head wrapped in a matching gilet. She moved with a calm authority, overseeing a team of young chefs, many of whom were recruited from local youth shelters and culinary programs. She was teaching them not just her recipes, but her philosophy. Cook with love, waste nothing, and always make an extra portion for a hungry soul. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Tundun was miserable. Her own business at the market had been failing for months. Her cheap trinkets couldn't compete with the authentic, handmade goods of other vendors, and her abrasive personality had driven away even her most loyal customers. Drowning in debt from her leveraged lifestyle, she had been forced to take a job with a high-end catering company to make ends meet. Tonight, her assignment was this gala. She moved through the opulent room, her waitress uniform feeling like a straitjacket, her heart a bitter knot of envy. She sneered at the women in their designer gowns and dripping jewels. All fake, she muttered to herself, just like their smiles. She had no idea who owned this new restaurant. She just knew it was the kind of place she had always dreamed of being in, but as a guest, not as a servant. At 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. Kaelo Ikwensi walked onto a small stage at the front of the room. He looked impossibly handsome and powerful in his Tom Ford suit. Tundun paused by a service station, her curiosity piqued. "Good evening, everyone," Kaelo began, his voice resonating with warmth. "Thank you all for being here. Tonight, we celebrate new beginnings. We celebrate the idea that the most powerful investments are not in stocks or real estate, but in people." He continued, "Many of you know me as a man of technology, of data and algorithms, but the inspiration for this foundation came not from a spreadsheet, but from a bowl of soup. A polite, confused titter went through the audience. Tundun rolled her eyes. Here we go, she thought. Another billionaire's fake sob story. 6 months ago, Kylo went on, I was feeling lost. I was surrounded by wealth, but I felt spiritually bankrupt. So I conducted an experiment. I went to a place where no one knew my name, a place teeming with life, the Liberty Market. I pretended I had lost my wallet. I was a man with nothing. I approached several vendors asking for just a bit of help. A bottle of water, a piece of bread. I was turned away, scoffed at. One vendor, he paused, his eyes scanning the room, and for a heart-stopping second, Tundun felt like he was looking right at her. Even shoved me and told me to get a job. Tundun's blood ran cold. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Her mind raced back, trying to place the face of the man she had pushed away. The scruffy beard, the old clothes. It couldn't be him. Kylo's voice pulled her back. I was about to give up on humanity, but then I met an angel. A woman who, without a moment's hesitation, gave a hungry stranger a bowl of her own magnificent pepper soup and a bottle of water, and refused to take a single cent in return. She taught me that character is what you do when you think no one of importance is watching. She showed me what true wealth looks like. Ladies and gentlemen, the heart and soul of Bisi's bowl, my partner in humanity, my dear friend, Mama Bisi Adebayo. As he spoke her name, a side door opened, and Mama Bisi walked towards the stage. She wasn't the stooped, tired old woman from the market. She was transformed. Clothed in a gown of shimmering gold kente, her bearing regal, her face serene, she looked like the queen she truly was. She joined Kylo on stage, and he took her hand, raising it to the applause. For Tundun, time stopped. The face on the stage, the name. Mama Bisi, the old witch. The woman whose stall was next to hers. The woman she had tormented. The beggar she had shoved, was Kylo Equensi. The room, the lights, the sounds, all faded into a roaring in her ears. The connection was made, the circuit completed, and the electrocution of understanding was absolute. Every cruel word she had ever said, every sneer, every act of petty spite, came rushing back to her. It all flashed before her eyes, not as a memory, but as a verdict. The room erupted into a standing ovation as Kylo announced the $50 million donation. The applause was a physical force, a wave of sound crashing over Tundun. Her mind, unable to process the sheer scale of her miscalculation, of her cosmic failure, simply shut down. The silver tray she was holding, laden with expensive champagne flutes, slipped from her nerveless fingers. The sound of the crash was shocking in the jubilant room, glass shattering on marble, a messy, ugly, pathetic sound. For a moment, the applause faltered. Hundreds of heads turned towards the noise. They saw the waitress, standing in a puddle of champagne and broken dreams. They saw her face, a grotesque mask of horror and self-immolation. They saw a woman being publicly destroyed, not by an accuser, but by her own character. In that moment of silent, collective judgment, as Mama Bisi stood on stage bathed in golden light, Tundun's humiliation was a portrait of perfect, poetic justice. In the months that followed, Bisi's bowl became more than a restaurant. It became a landmark. Critics raved about the food, calling it the most authentic and soulful Nigerian cuisine in the country. But people came for more than the pepper soup. They came for the feeling. The restaurant operated on a pay-what-you-can model during lunch hours, and the back door of the kitchen was never closed to those who were hungry. Mama Bisi had realized her dream, and it was more beautiful than she had ever imagined. She was no longer just a cook. She was a pillar of the community, a matriarch to a city. The BC's Bowl Foundation, managed by a board that Kaelo had assembled, began its work in earnest. They opened 3 new community kitchens in the first 6 months, providing thousands of free, nutritious meals every single day. Ade, Kaelo's long-suffering head of security, was put in charge of logistics. He now spent his days coordinating shipments of rice, yams, and fish, complaining good-naturedly to Kaelo over the phone. "I used to protect you from assassins, sir," he'd say with a dry sigh. "Now I protect bags of onions from spoilage. I'm not sure which is more stressful." Funke blossomed. She was enrolled in the city's most prestigious private school, her sharp mind finally given the resources to match her ambition. Kaelo, who had no family of his own, became a fixture in their lives. He was the doting uncle who took Funke to the Science Museum, the devoted son who sat with Mama BC in her new, comfortable home, listening to her stories. He had sought a partner in humanity and had found a family instead. He had never been happier. And Tundun? Her fall was as swift as it was predictable. The catering company fired her the day after the gala. Her picture, standing amidst the shattered glass, had made it into a gossip column online. She was unemployable. Humiliated, she tried to return to her stall at the Liberty Market, but the story had spread like wildfire. The other vendors, who had once stayed silent in the face of her bullying, now met her with cold shoulders and looks of contempt. Her landlord, citing missed payments and numerous complaints, terminated her lease. Within a month, she lost the stall. Within 3, she was evicted from her apartment. The fake Gucci bags and flashy jewelry were sold for pennies on the dollar. Her life, built on a foundation of appearance and cruelty, had crumbled into dust. One cold evening, about a year after the gala, Mama BC was being driven home by Ade. Her own car was in the shop, and Kaelo insisted she use his service. As they passed a dimly lit bus stop, Mama BC suddenly said, "Stop the car, Ade." Ade pulled the Rolls-Royce smoothly to the curb. "Is everything all right, Mama?" "Wait here," she said, her eyes fixed on a figure huddled on the bench. She got out of the car. It was Tundun. She was thin, her clothes were worn, and her face had the hollowed-out look of despair. She was a ghost of the flashy woman she had once been. Tundun looked up as the magnificent car stopped, her expression a mixture of awe and bitterness. Then she saw who was getting out. Her body tensed, bracing for a final, triumphant blow. She expected a lecture, a gloating remark, a final twist of the knife. But Mama BC said nothing. She simply walked over and held out a large, insulated food container. It was warm to the touch. Inside, Tundun could smell the rich, peppery aroma of the soup that had started it all. Along with the container, Mama BC pressed a folded bill into Tundun's hand. It was a crisp $100 bill. Tundun looked from the soup to the money and then into Mama BC's eyes. She saw no triumph there, no satisfaction, only a deep, profound sadness, a quiet pity. Without a single word, Mama BC turned and walked back to the car, got in, and Ade drove away. Tundun stood alone at the bus stop, holding the warm container of soup and the money. The unexpected, devastating act of grace was more painful than any insult could have been. It was a final, quiet lesson in the vast, unbridgeable chasm between their characters. The warmth from the container seeped into her cold hands, and for the first time in her life, Tundun broke down and cried. Not tears of self-pity, but tears of real, soul-shattering shame. It was not a redemption, not yet, but it was a beginning. the first crack of light in a very dark room. In the end, a story is just a story, but the truths they carry can build foundations stronger than stone. The world will try to convince you that a person's value is written on their bank statement or the label on their suit. It will teach you to measure worth by the shine of a car or the size of a house. But that is a fool's measurement, a currency of ghosts. True wealth is not held in a vault. It is nurtured in the soul. It is not what you own, but what you are willing to give away. The hand that gives when it has almost nothing is the richest hand of all, for it holds the sacred currency of grace. A simple bowl of soup, offered with an open heart, can carry more weight and worth than a mountain of gold offered for show. Because kindness is the only investment that yields infinite returns. It is the realest thing in a world of illusions. The quiet superpower that can change everything. If this story moved your heart, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every tale has a lesson, and Alfred's Folk Tales never forgets.